And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program. What will likely come out of the ongoing trade consultations between China and the United States? Professor Yuan Peng, a well-known Chinese scholar on U.S.-China relations, sheds some light right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. We now move on to efforts to settle disputes between China and the U.S. The U.S. delegation has arrived in Beijing for a new round of high-level economic and trade consultations. From February the 14th to 15th, Chinese Vice Premier Liu He will hold consultations with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and the Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin in Beijing. Building on the recent consultation in Washington, the two sides will again talk about issues of common concern. The ongoing consultations are a re-examination of trade ties, whether the two sides will go in the same direction. In this regard, we picked the brains of Yuan Peng, the president of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. This is part of our special series, An Updated Vision, a review and outlook for China's diplomatic strategies for the year 2019. Let's listen in about what he had to say.
Yeah, March the 1st is the deadline for the 90 days trade negotiation set by the two presidents in Argentina summit. So all the world people are watching that. The good news is that before the deadline is coming, the two teams are working very hard to do their best to achieve the final deal. It seems the process goes relatively smooth and in a positive direction. So we hope in the March 1st, both sides can achieve a more comprehensive deal. Even that.
What is a more comprehensive deal to you?
At least they will achieve a minimum, deal. We cannot expect that through a single trade deal to resolve all structural problems, which lasted 40 years. And both sides are realistic to watch the deadline. But at least before the March 1st, both sides want to have a deal. Looks good, and also good for the future, more deeper negotiation and the cooperation, I think. So March 1st is the timeline to set the tone for the post 90 days U.S.-China relations.
But Professor Yuan, on the other hand, is China that desperate to reach a deal with the U.S. on March the 1st? Because it's a negotiation. The other side could well take advantage of this urgency China feels and push forward more demands within this framework, hard for China to be able to resolve.
I think it's not a one-way deal. It's bound to benefit to both sides. It's not just American give us lists, we respond. Chinese side always will also have our own list. So both sides need to make some compromise. This is the essence of the negotiation. But even if some structural problems cannot be resolved this time, I think the Chinese still confident that we can manage the difficulties ahead, because we did the 2018 experience tells Chinese a lesson that Chinese we should be more confident, we should be more brave
cool-minded
in accepting the strategic competition with the #1 superpower in the States. So 2019, on the one hand, we hope soft landing of the trade dispute, but on the other hand, we are fully prepared for the difficulties ahead. But March 1st is a timeline for shaping the post-90 days U.S.-China relations. If some deal be reached, then we can have a new start to think and to think about longer-term U.S.-China relations.
Relations with the United States, though important, is not the only thing China is dealing with at this time. Professor Yuan Peng also talked about moving China's goalpost from being rich to being a strong nation and to find its own way in a new era. Professor Yuan, in some earlier occasions, you were talking about your understanding of the logic, why the American side, particularly the current administration, chose the approach as they did in 2018 toward China. Very hard approach. Would you like to share with us?
So I think that the trade war do have some strategic consideration behind that. The reason for that is that, number one, it's China is now undergoing transformation of a Chinese model. So if the trade war, cannot be handled well, maybe it's a very disaster for Chinese economic growth or rising. Number two, I think Trump is good at using trade method to achieve his American first strategy, and which also were pleased his supporters in the States. And China is a major target for this. And number three is that high tech still American grasp the advantages. Using high tech as a tool, maybe they think it's much easier for them to avoid a military confrontation or ideological conflict, but at the same time can achieve its strategic goal to contain China from rising too fast.
But the U.S.-China relations is much beyond who Trump is, isn't it?
Yeah, because now we have to face three different Americas. Trump is just one part of America. On the other hand, we have the establishment power. Still, they are still look China in a strategic way. And thirdly, there is a deep state power behind that. They are working very hard to dig every elective parts of China. So how to deal with the three different America simultaneously is a new challenge to Chinese American policy. So both sides are thinking about how to deal with the other side.
Right.
American is thinking about that, but they don't have a concrete policy and answers.
And does China have?
China is also thinking about that, but Chinese today is more responsive to American policy. So how to find a new way, rather than just respond, but to shape American environment. This is a new task for Chinese American policy to do in the next few years.
It is no secret that the U.S.-China relations has always been an important component of China's own path of searching of its own identity. But on the other hand, it is not all. After all, China has to do its own things well. So how will that search of U.S.-China relations, the tangle between the two, fit into the overall picture China is looking at itself right now, not just to the U.S., but also to the others in the world?
Yes, U.S.-China relations is the most important bilateral relations for China, but it's not the only important relations. We have also other important relations like China-Russia, like European, like Japanese, China-Japanese relations. So how to balance all those relations with the different powers and put U.S.-China relations in a proper position.
Looking at 2019, you got several timelines and several important events and occasions. For example, you've got the 70th anniversary, the PRC celebration. That's going to be a big one. So how is China going to look at itself 70 years of its international relation path and figure out the new one, or maybe gradually figure out a new one? Professor Yuan.
Yeah, number one, China now is entering a new era. Like 19th Party's Congress report mentioned, like President Xi mentioned many times, now we're entering a new era. The new era means that China now moving from a rich to strong. How to make Chinese richer is a major task in past 40 years. Now in next 30 years or 40 years, the major task is how to make Chinese from rich to strong. Strong means more comprehensively. Rich just means economically speaking. Strong means not only economic but also military, scientific, cultural. So this is the major transformation of Chinese grand strategy. So in terms of this, I think China today we are more confident than before. So confidence is our new feature.
While China is being confident, will others also be the winner in this process?
Of course, because Chinese confidence is comparatively speaking, compare China from last century, compare China from 70 years ago, 40 years ago. So we're bound to be more confident based on Chinese new achievements in past 40 or 70 years. But this not necessarily means that we are winner takes all. We still pursue the so-called win-win cooperation. We don't like Americans said that win-win means win twice.
G20 summit likely to be in Japan June, and therefore you see the world leaders all going there, including China and Americas. But on the other hand, it's not just bilateral relations. It's also about China's multilateral approach on top of the March 1st U.S.-China possibility to reach a deal. Professor Yuan, how will China be able to balance and incorporate the development of the other relationship into the overall mechanism China will embrace?
Yeah, G20 meeting in Japan is another chance and a platform for the major powers in the world, 20 countries, to sitting together, to working together on thinking about the future trade and the economic, picture in the future, which is not so. It's not so focused in 2018 Argentina G20 summit. So Japanese G20 in Tokyo should be more focused on, for example, the future of WTO, the future economic trade order. But on the other hand, beside that, there are several bilateral relations, bilateral activities like U.S.-China leaders meeting, China-Russian, and most importantly, this year is Chinese-Japanese relations. Because if that's the case, it means Chinese leaders, the first time in many years, to visit Tokyo, visit Japan. How this means for China-Japanese relations matters, for Chinese overall diplomacy. I think maybe if you put U.S.-China relations in focus, seems lots of difficulties and even contradictions. But if we look China-Japanese, China-European, China-Russian, China-India relations, all those bilateral relations are improving.
I just wonder, from your perspective, the mindset of Chinese intellectuals when you look at the international relations these days, particularly the complicated situation China is facing right now.
We are living in the great era, which means the unprecedented era in 100 years. So we are fortunate that lots of new things, new cases, new affairs happen every month, every week, or even every day. So lots of surprise. Those surprises for average people maybe it's not a good thing, but for international researchers it should be very exciting.
A lot of food for thought.
Yeah. But at the same time, because of every day we face different issues and affairs, there is a very big test for our knowledge, for our wisdom, for our method to think. So how to embrace the new era is a very big task for Chinese intellectual circle, in particular for those international relations circle.
There's probably one balance you have to help us to understand how you and your peers are going to be able to keep. On the one hand, 200 years, China has been occupied. China was in war, China was forced into war by the others, China was in civil wars, and there is a victim mindset, as some say. However, when you look at China's recent development over the past 40 years, rapid. It's the pride of the world. And as a result, China has this confidence. So how, in a way, balance these two very different directions of looking at oneself and the world and come up with a cool-minded approach, Professor Yuan? I'm sure you're thinking about that almost every day.
Not every day, maybe occasionally. You know, more than two. I think more than two mindset.
Complex.
For example, it's very complex. For example, Chinese people we have a very proud for 5,000 years of civilization, and we are also has a victim, mindset because of from 1840s up to now, and we are very much independent from 1949 when PRC was established. And in the past 40 years, with the success of the reform and opening up, Chinese now is more and more confident, optimistic. So it's a very complexity of Chinese mindset. How to combine all different mindsets together, find a proper and rational mindset is not only test Chinese leadership, but also test all the average Chinese people. But for those researchers on international relations, we must have cool-minded, otherwise we will have a wrong judgment of the situation, then provide some wrong policy recommendations. So how to maintain a sober, serious, cool-minded thinking on domestic and international affairs, I think is the most important challenge to us.
But how? That is the most important question.
No matter what happened, several things should build in our mind all the way. Number one, be confident, which means we can overcome all the difficulties ahead. Number two.
That's a can-do spirit, isn't it?
Yeah. Number two, be humble, which means when you deal with something, should be more modesty. And number three, should be more careful, because so many traps ahead. We should very, very carefully to do everything. And finally, I think we should be very optimistic. We should believe that tomorrow want to be more brighter than today.
Professor Yuan, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's our talk with Professor Yuan Peng, one of the leading scholars in China on China's future strategies. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.